For those who want recommendations for clean, Christian-friendly romance, rejoice. There's a new booktuber on the scene, coming at you like a hot plate of diaper casserole. What an exciting thing. Let's get this over with. It might be a surprising thing to learn that Mormon romance writers even exist, going by the stereotypes. Romance novels are for sexually frustrated housewives who use lustful narratives to pass the time between picking the kids up at school and attending their spinning classes, where they try hard not to think about the metaphors involved in their lack of mobility despite their hard work. They read romances to give their lives flavor, to read about something more dangerous and wild than themselves. And then Mormons, of course, are neither dangerous nor wild, and averse to any story spicier than a boiled egg with some cilantro on it. You would think the Venn diagram of the two has the tiniest of overlaps, but like some key scenes in non-Mormon romance novels, you would be shocked to see how big it is. Regency romances are especially popular among Mormons. I took these pictures of the bookshelves in the main branch of Deseret Book in downtown Salt Lake City, where the adult fiction is kept. These shelves include the majority of contemporary fiction, romance, mystery, and historical fiction. Of them, these are the Regency romance novels. These ones over here are actual Jane Austen. I could make my theories as to why this is, but I'm not here to do that. I'm here to review one of them and see what this niche genre has to offer. Can a clean romance be any good? Will I be pleasantly surprised at what I find? These are the uncharted waters I explore, he said, as if literary criticism were not the sort of thing that you do with one hand as you roll your boogers into a ball with the other. Today I'll be reviewing My Fair Gentleman by Nancy Campbell Allen. Ms. Allen has published 12 other novels, this one winning the 2015 Whitney Award for Historical Romance, so I look forward to it with much anticipation. As a historical, read Regency, romance, My Fair Gentleman takes place in England, but right out of the gate there are some problems with that statement. The first is that it never really places you in a specific time. There aren't any mentions of the current wars or political struggles, nobody talks about current events, there aren't any time markers by way of technology or industry. The only environmental clues I have to go on are the presence of bonnets and horse-drawn carriages, which puts the timeline somewhere vaguely between the years 1600 and 1880. There is mention of the ton, which narrows it down a little, but even that specific flavor of aristocracy is scrubbed clean of anything distinguishing about it. The second is that the characters appear to have been crafted from the stuff out of the bulk bin of English stereotypes at Winco. Not 500 words into the novel it uses the phrase, "If you please, madam," and a character silently wishes he could go home and have a spot of tea. The dialogue and manners put me less in England and more in a theme park with rides that are named after British things. Welcome to England land, where the chimney sweeps sing and dance, and the only possible struggle you may have in life is in choosing which buff, gravel-voiced rich man in tailcoats you will make yours by teaching him to read. Cholera, industry, the Irish, never heard of 'em, chaps. I'd hate to see the American version of this story. Yee-haw, partner, I'd rather be home with my electric bowl dipping my In-N-Out double cheeseburger into milk that comes in a gallon jug. Call me presumptuous, but one of the satisfying parts about reading a historical novel is in seeing what it's like to live in a time long past, to be surprised at the things that were different from our life now and the things that we still have in common. But hey, maybe that's not a fair criticism to make. I'm not reading this historical romance for the history. I'm reading it because the kids are at school, a robot vacuums my floor, I have 5 hours to kill, and my husband never satisfied me sexually, so let's push ahead and get to know our heroine and hero. Jack Elliott is a brash and considerate slob of a sailor who works very well as a romantic interest, because right at the beginning of the story he inherits a boatload of money and the title of Earl from his dead grandfather. His other likes include having big muscles, visiting his summer home in your sexy dreams, and being just rude enough to be likable. Miss Lady Ivy Kiera Knightley Carlyle is the granddaughter of a friend of the dead Earl's, a proper and etiquette-bound young lady who would never think of spoiling her distinguished career as a part-time aliased magazine writer by going off and marrying a man. Lady Ivy's grandmother sends her on a quest to help Mr. Elliot in assimilating into the nobility, because apparently there's a proficiency test for inheriting enormous amounts of money in England land. There are secondary characters too, and frankly ones with both more interesting personalities and backstories, but whatever, the hero and heroine's whole purpose is for the author to mash them together and make kissing noises, so I'll move on. You might have noticed by the book's title that My Fair Gentleman is a gender-swapped version of My Fair Lady, with Lady Lady Ivy taking the role of Henry Higgins and James Hunkman as Eliza Doolittle. Gender swapping stories is a kind of annoying trend right now. The problem with taking a familiar story and moving their genitals around is that the idea is sellable, but rarely does it add anything to the story. The idea of gender swapping makes people say, ooh, that would be interesting, but it's not interesting. I mean, sometimes the original story has something to say about gender dynamics that doesn't come out until you switch them, but most of the time it's just a poor retelling of the original. I could see the potential for a gender-bent My Fair Lady, though. That one song that Henry Higgins sings in the film version would be flipped into Why Can't a Man Be More Like a Woman? And Miss Higgins would rant about how men are brutish and impatient and pee standing up, and then I and everyone in the year 1964 would wonder if Rex Harrison was a lesbian instead of just gay. It would be a rewarding challenge, one that really tests an author's skill, but in true Deseret book form, nobody and nothing is challenged, and Nancy Campbell Allen completely avoids all talk of gender roles by doing a clever trick, which is to make the story not anything like My Fair Lady. Lady Ivy isn't proud, or demanding, or selfish, or a linguist, or even educated at all, as far as I read. She's just an expert in etiquette, which, now that I say it out loud, is something that I have a few questions about. Is etiquette something you study? Does she have her degree in etiquette? How does an etiquette expert fill up her day? By sitting in a chair with good posture and ignoring the signs of domestic violence for several hours? By practicing saying I never in the mirror just right? Can you even be passionate about etiquette? I thought it was just kind of something you do. There's a proper way to make a bed, but people don't hire consultants to help them live the proper bedmaker lifestyle. If there's anything else that Lady Ivy pencils into her schedule, we never hear about it. For another thing, for someone so prim and proper, she sure does nothing to avoid confrontations or hurtful gestures, which, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the whole point of having good etiquette. Anyway, Sailor Jackie Jack fails on the Eliza Doolittle front too, because to be honest, he doesn't need any help. He knows how to work. He knows how to dress nicely. He doesn't drink too much or go off with random women. He proves himself a savvy businessman. He even knows a good amount about high society and makes friends in the nobility easily. He's just kind of rude sometimes. Now that I think about it, it might have been a much more interesting story if Ivy weren't in it. If Jack had to navigate the noble classes on his own, learning to adapt with each social function he attended, rolling with his punches, and in that way both Jack and the reader could learn more about English high society along the way. It would have been a lot better than what there was, anyway. The basic formula of My Fair Gentleman is setting up a social encounter, having 5 lines of dialogue in that social encounter, followed by 2 chapters of Lady Ivy lecturing Jack about what he should have done correctly, then repeating the whole thing again and again until after the book, when they presumably enter a loveless marriage. Oh, sorry, spoilers ahead. On the cusp of inheriting his money, Jack O'Lantern and Lady Ivy are forced to work together because Lady Ivy's grandma said so. Lady Ivy makes a lesson plan to turn the salty sailor into a refined gentleman, and the majority of the book is spent doing that. They get distracted for a few bits where the secondary characters' pasts come back to haunt them, but I mean, not really. It's nice to know more about where they came from, but they're never in any danger. They are nobles. No amount of slouching and slurping soup will take their money from them and make them not nobles, so the conflicts are kind of moot. For half the book, their only antagonists are random people that make mean remarks and then never appear in the story again. Those chapters were especially slow. It was like the author had never seen a conflict before and had to work off of verbal descriptions. The last half of the book revolved around several attempts on Jack's life by an assassin with an obvious identity, and also Lady Ivy getting major mood swings to make the plot more dramatic because somebody mixed up her medications or something. The book tries to make Lady Ivy's job as an advice columnist a point of drama too, and let me take the opportunity here to say that the snippets from the columns and the epigraphs of every chapter get really silly as the book goes on. Quote, "In our times of deepest worry for a friend, it is then that we realize how very much we esteem one another," close quote, is not etiquette advice or even advice at all. Anyway, the payout for the idea that a character with a stick up her butt might be found out as a character with a stick slightly farther up her butt is not great. Now, about the love story, I was pleased to find that none of the romance in the story was red flag waving sexual harassment, except for that one part where Jack thinks to himself that if Lady Ivy won't have him, then he might abduct her. There were also a few juicy bits, or at least slightly more moist bits, when Ivy happens upon Jack shirtless and when she helps tend to him him when he's injured. Do the characters have an undeniable chemistry? Yes, they do. I know that because the book explicitly told me so in chapter 5, where it says their attraction was undeniable. Is the love story satisfying? Not by any conventional definition, no. The first kiss they have is surprising and swoon-worthy, but after that the romance just sort of flops around like a trout trying to make it back into the water, and not in the sexy way that you're thinking. I'm not mad at My Fair Gentleman, just disappointed. It certainly isn't the worst book I've ever read, but its descriptions are often painful to read. Its heroine reacts to conflict randomly, its dialogue had no subtlety, and it was bland in every way that mattered. Heaven help whatever the second and third placing novels for the Whitney Awards were. If you're currently standing in Deseret Book wondering whether you should buy My Fair Gentleman, my recommendation is to leave the store and walk 3.5 blocks west and 2.5 blocks south to a cafe called the Rose Establishment, where for the price of one copy of this book you can buy 2 bowls of lukewarm porridge with peanut butter and eat them while staring out a window at the side of a building. That sounds like a good rating for it, actually. 2 lukewarm bowls of porridge out of 10. Hooray for reading. Join me next time as I review The Vicar's Daughter by Josie Kilpack, another beautiful tale woven from an engaging imagination and disciplined authorial skill. Is there a book you want me to review? Want to call the LDS religion a cult? Leave a comment down below and I might look at it sometime.